Okay, so what we have is a lot of there's a lot of traffic around the building safety manager role and about existing buildings, and quite rightly, a lot of the emphasis of the presentations were based upon new design, new construction, and taking us through the various gateways of that, and quite rightly, a lot of the audience have to grapple with existing buildings and how to manage that portfolio. So these are just a sample of some of the questions that come in. On the building safety managers front, what real control will building safety managers have when CEOs say, I want this done this way? Will the BSM be a company going forward rather than an individual? What happens if LAs, HAs have buildings that have no information and lots of issues? Is the BSM going to have the backing when the building does not conform? And are BSMs likely to be building compliance managers and not just fire safety? So quite a wide range of questions, but all linked around the building safety managers. So I'm going to open this up to Lucy in the first instance, and perhaps some of the other panel members will interject.
Yeah, thanks, John. So with regards to the real control of the building safety manager, I think that also links in really nicely to the other question that's going, like, is a building safety manager basically going to be given the autonomy or backing when they say that the building does not conform? And I think ultimately they have to be. It's not going to work if we have siloed working between the accountable person and the building safety manager, then the whole thing falls down. The building safety manager will have to have a real key relationship with that accountable person. At the end of the day, they're their eyes and ears, they're the one managing it, and they're the one that's responsible for reporting any issue. So that's that mandatory reporting scheme which we touched on earlier, which is introduced by the accountable person, but ultimately it'll be down to the building safety manager to raise any issues directly with the building safety regulator. So I guess they're holding that over the accountable person, that, well, if I'm not happy, I will take this up the chain beyond you to the building safety regulator, and that will almost force the accountable person to agree. And I think if that relationship's not there, then maybe the accountable person needs to be looking for a different building safety manager to ensure that they can work together and for the process to work. I'd like to give this question to Paul with regards to whether the building safety manager will be a company going forward rather than an individual, because I think he covered that quite nicely in his presentation, looking at the role that the facilities managers can take, and obviously Knight Frank act as an organisation and not one individual.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously still in its infancy. It's still to be defined, but I do think there'll be instances on MAM sites possibly where we will have to have it as a company-based role rather than just an individual. We're looking at, as a kind of organisation as well, both myself and also other directors, that we will be looking at doing a higher level course, looking at like a level 6 or diploma based course, which will also give us a more rounded view of the actual building safety manager role, and also obviously our kind of input into that, and also what we need to do to adhere to it. I think there will be instances where the company is the BSM rather than just the individual.
Thanks, Paul. Lucy, just expanding on this a little bit, there clearly is concern, and rightly, about the lack of information on existing buildings. It sort of comes on to the next slide, really. And it's about the golden thread of information. And L&Q actually mentioned that they have obviously 200 existing high-rise residential buildings, and many of them from an older stock transfer. And obviously the lack of information that they may have on that, how's that really going to impact the building safety regulator in actually demonstrating to them that they're actually in control? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we alluded to this earlier, that actually this is going to almost hit the existing building stock a bit harsher. We know that Regulation 38 didn't work in the way that it should, and that fire safety information or real key information for existing buildings maybe doesn't exist. So L&Q definitely are not alone in having that feeling. And I know that one of the routes to go down is obviously holistic assessment. We've seen this with external wall surveys, we've seen this with type 4s, and it's just about trying to gain that information now, albeit at a later date, but it's still very valuable. And with regards to the other question, that what are the implications then for landlords and residents that have these buildings which may not be able to achieve a building assurance certificate? Now, what the building safety regulator has done is they've introduced 3 types of conditions. So you have special conditions. These deal with specific risks which are imposed by the BSR. Voluntary conditions, which are being proposed by the accountable person. So that's the accountable person saying, look, I'm aware of the risk in this building, but we're doing X, Y, Z to mitigate this. And mandatory conditions, which will apply to all buildings within scope. And that will be things like, when we learnt from the barking incident, we woke up to the fact that maybe wooden balconies aren't the best idea in barbecue season or any season at all. And then those mandatory conditions then will be enforced on absolutely everyone. So I think it's more of a case of, for existing buildings, that we're looking for the accountable person to be able to demonstrate how they're dealing with their risks. With regards to the cost implications of that, obviously we've seen this Wake in Watch fund, and then also the fund to replace cladding. And I know that that's only sitting at the above 18 metres mark, which I know everybody's got a lot of comments on, but actually at the moment that's what the Building Safety Bill will first be focusing on. So they tie up quite nicely. And I think as we see an expansion with that fund, we'll also see an expansion with the Building Safety Bill.
Okay, thank you. So, Simon, do you want to comment a little bit on the collection of the information? I mean, you've touched on it in terms of your presentation, and you rightly identified that there's a significant amount of information that potentially would go into an operating system. I've already seen some requests from clients of ours asking us to start to compile some of this information, and the shopping list is extensive. So have you any thoughts about what informations should be prioritised in terms of building this initial information for the regulator?
I think it's all the work that's going on already, isn't it, in terms of type 4 risk assessments and actually forensically deconstructing the building to make sure it's fit for purpose, and having an as-built fire strategy as well. So 2 of the things you will have to have for the safety case, you'll have to have an as-built fire strategy. How is it constructed? How is it going to be? What safety features are inside there? How are we going to evacuate it in the event of a fire? And then obviously you'll have to then support that with evidence that the building is fit for purpose. So if it says it's a stay-put policy, how do you know it's fit for purpose? What information's in there? So your safety case is going to be the big thing that people rely on. But once you've got all those that information relating to the building, you've then got to make sure you use that information and you've got access to that information and you can work with that information. So it's about interrogating that information, addressing it and using it for your advantage, rather than just putting it in a filing cabinet somewhere and just leaving it. You've got to work out what your maintenance regimes are, when things have got to be replaced, when they've got to be checked, and that's got to be flagged up to you as an operator, and so we don't miss it. And if we're going through a refurbishment process, how then do we manage that, control that? What information then needs to go in relating to that building? So it's a big ask, I think. And as I said, all those disasters, management has been the failure. It really has. Something's happened, and management of that building has been a contributory factor. Does that answer your question, John, or is it?
It might answer mine, but there's probably about 200 other people that might have a different opinion. I'll move on now because I am conscious of time. A similar theme around sort of resident engagement. This particular question's already been raised, but it does relate to residents as well. But does the Building Safety Bill put anything in place to protect residents from building safety charges? And when are residents also going to be held accountable for issues they cause by their actions? Any thoughts on that, anyone?
I think, Paul, if you want to lead on building safety charges, and I don't mind picking up about residents being held accountable.
Yeah, so I mean, it's been picked up already in the pre-legislative scrutiny of the report, and it doesn't do enough to protect the residents. So I think when the bill is published, that will have to be redefined and be re-looked at. And obviously, as Lucy alluded to earlier, there's been a Wake and Watch fund developed, and also a cladding fund as well to protect the residents. So I think it's certainly something that once the bill is in place in situ, that it will be raised again and will be looked at.
Okay. I mean, clearly there are concerns, as we're all aware at the moment, about the 18-metre rule, and what seems to be the inequity between those people that live in buildings above 18 metres that are likely to get the costs of any remediation, particularly around cladding, funded, and those below 18 metres that they won't. I think that is going to go through the hoops a few things, and I think there needs to be that needs to be realigned because it's just inequitable. But yeah, making some provision within the bill to protect residents is absolutely essential. Lucy, you was going to pick up the second point.
Yeah, so with regards to resident accountability, that is actually a key outcome of the Building Safety Bill. I don't think we've quite touched on it yet, and it's putting there's a responsibility for residents to report any safety failings they identify within their own building, but also it's putting greater responsibility on them for elements within their control. So we're looking at the gas installation within their individual demise and the electrical installation. It's not clear at the moment whether that goes as far as to include their flat entrance door, because I know from working with a lot of our key clients that they have real difficulty. They've identified that the flat entrance door, for example, falls short of the standard. It's been changed by that resident. The resident's a long leasehold and they're now refusing to answer the door and refusing to change it, and they feel like they don't have enough power there. So hopefully with the Building Safety Bill, it will maybe reiterate that and put a little bit more power for the client to ultimately get them to change their door rather than having to pay for the door as a means of getting it changed. As I said, I'm not sure whether it includes flat entrance doors, but it definitely mentions about gas and electrical and things like that. And for example, if they cause any damage in the building which affects the structural fire integrity of that building.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'm going to move on to the last slide that we've got at the moment. As I say, we have got a number of questions, and we will pull them all together, and we'll send out a note to everyone that's attended this event with a response to each of the questions that have been placed. But this one, again, conscious of time, which is probably directed more at Mark. What would the impact of the additional input of the PD have on PD fees, and how much will all these measures cost, and who will pay? If I've put the first question to Mark, and then perhaps I'll leave it to the panel to contribute to the last question.
Yeah, I think that's an inevitable question, John. Fees always comes into play in everything that professional consultants do, and it's also inevitable that fees will rise. When there's more liability and onerous duty attached to a role under statute that requires a significant amount of upskilling and new competencies being learned, fees will rise. My fear is that that history doesn't repeat itself in as much as within CDM 2015 and previous iterations, sometimes fees have been driven down by industry where there's a perceived lack of sort of value of what the CDM professional can contribute, whether that's lack of value perceived by client organisations or design and construction consultants and professionals. I hope that doesn't repeat itself here, because I think it's a significant role, obviously, with significant liability, and therefore it's only right that our fees will rise and will be proportionate and in line with the risks posed by the project.
And indeed, I firmly believe that, as you said, history has shown us that the PD role has been somewhat undervalued, but the requirements here under the Building Safety Bill are put in immense focus on that role. As I say, the three primary roles of the building safety manager, the principal contractor, and the principal designer are absolutely key, and therefore they're looking for a high level of competence in those roles, together with improved competence for high-rise or high-risk residential buildings, and to demonstrate. That's why this competency steering group was formed by Hackett, and there are 12 working groups that have been set up looking specifically at competency and what needs to be done to effectively raise the bar. I think it's just a natural consequence that as a result of that, fees will come up. But I think the procurement teams need to be, and there is a working group set up specifically for procurement and products, need to recognise the importance of the skills that they need to employ on these buildings, and the fees have got to be recognised as being proportionate to that level of expertise that's needed.
But in parallel with that, though, John, it's about working with educated, informed clients that understand that understand that to do the job properly, the fees got to be where they've got to be. All too often, we've all seen, everyone on the call probably over the years, certain elements of certain professionals' fees driven down by clients that are sometimes unaware of their duties or the liabilities attached to their duties and who they're appointing. So it's about working with, well, not just working with, but educating everyone everyone that's a client organisation with respect of why our fees would need to be where they need to be. That doesn't just go for the PD, that goes for all of us, doesn't it, really?
Absolutely. Okay, thanks for that, Mark.
Okay.
So anyone want to take the second question?
I think it's a good one for James. Difficult question like that.
There's one short answer, isn't there? The end user. However this rolls down, so different clients are looking at different clients are potentially introducing a building safety fund, a service charge, so almost an addition to the service charge for the in-scope buildings. But over time, as that gets eroded, and if it does go into 11 meters, that is likely just to get wrapped up into kind of service charge and kind of like the costs are going to go up. There's no point saying where's the cost sit at the moment, because long term commercial organisations will reflect their cost and the market will be driven. I think the important thing there is procurement. If you keep looking at costs and rather than qualitative measures, you will keep having this conversation. It's more, to me, it's about what you're getting for that and how safe is your buildings. Because if you look at costs and you start having that conversation about costs, you end up driving down that cost and go, why are we paying for this? When really the culture of Hackett should be, and it is about, how do I get all my buildings compliant at the moment? And then we can work out that. And it's only one of the challenges of costs that we're currently sitting at the moment. So whilst it's a really important question, I think it's something long term about how do you make kind of like multiple occupable buildings sustainable for the future.
Yeah, indeed.
And John, there was a document that came out. I think the government produced a costing document that came out at the same time as a consultation on what was going into the building safety regulations. And I can't remember where I've got that document, but there is one available. And obviously, it was just suggestive cost of how much it would cost to produce a safety case, etc., for a building. So people might be able to find that and have a look at the kind of costs that the government are anticipating that they will need to spend.
Yeah, so that report is about 12 months old, and it's saying about in between 10 and 15,000 pounds per high-rise building.
Really? Was that per resident?
Oh, yeah, per dwelling.
Yeah, indeed. Okay. Well, thank you for that. I'm going to end the slideshow now. I just wanted to recognizing the time, we've got 10 minutes left. Unless there's anything else that the panel in particular wanted to raise, I'm conscious that everyone's probably wanting their lunch and it's been a long session. But if there's not any more points to be raised, then I'm going to conclude the event. I want to say a special thanks to our guests, James, Paul, and Simon, and also to my fellow colleagues, Lucy and Mark, and for everyone that's actually attended the event today. I say we've been absolutely overwhelmed by the interest in this, so much so that we had to put a cap on it. We will be, I say we've recorded the presentations, and we will be publishing those to all those that have attended, and they will also be available for others to consider. And we're also likely, due to the numbers, we'll be looking to rerun this event at some future point. So thank you to all, and thank you to everyone that took the time to join this webinar, and have a good day and enjoy your lunch.